You know, it's been a while since. Ooh, you can see the reflection of me in my glasses. That's weird. Okay, sorry. Anyway, it's been a while since. Can you guess what I'm going to say? A floor talk. Let's do it. Oh, almost dropped my phone on my face. That would have gone badly. Okay, so me and Godzilla, we gonna chill here. It's not the floor, it's the bed. But the angle, the terrible lighting, it's all the same. So we'll call it a floor talk. I just made the video with the black background where I read my morning routine paper good morning thing. And it made me think, I'm going to take these off because it's not going to be flattering. Either way. It made me think about, I look orange. I'm so easily distracted. It made me think about how frustrated I am with the fact that being an adult makes you dumb. I wrote that document when I was 19 and 20. And is that true? Good God. Yeah. I'm 24 now. And I have not put together anything that meaningful or helpful for my own self-development in years. And that is a stupid way to feel. Also, I notice myself all the time, like, falling into mindsets and making decisions in such a way that would have bothered, like, younger, idealistic me so much. So much. And, like, 8th grade me would have just hated me. Like, as a person, 8th grade me would be very upset. But 8th grade me was also a completely different human being. I think 20-year-old me would just be like, really? Like, honestly, you're just making excuses for yourself? And 19-year-old me would be like, what the hell? I thought that things were going to change faster. And 24-year-old me also feels that way. I am always upset with the pace of progress and change, both in who I am and in the things that I'm doing. So that's not new. But I do think that I'm starting to, like, settle into it and get used to it more, and that bothers me a lot. So, like, part of it's, like, experience, and, like, I know now a little bit more about how to set realistic expectations for projects and for getting things done and for actually building things that matter. And experience is a double-edged sword, like a very, very sharp double-edged sword. It is not only fantastic for effectiveness, like for having a vision and then making that vision something manifest in the world that other people experience. Unparalleled usefulness experience. But for coming up with a unique and worthwhile vision that questions the status quo and makes things different in a substantially better and different way, experience ruins your ability to do that, just completely trashes it. There's this phrase that Peter Diamandis says all the time, and that is that experts can tell you why it won't work. And that's exactly the idea, is that when you have experience and you become an expert, they have the same set of word parts for a reason. Experience makes you an expert. When you become an expert, you know what won't work. And you lose sight of what might work. And I think what might work is like what makes the world spin. The world is built on things that might work. And if you're not willing to even consider what might work that you think probably won't, you just can't innovate. Like, by definition, innovation is doing something that has a high probability of not working out and a low probability of making everything substantially better. I mean, it's not the exact definition for innovation by any means, but, like, that's the spirit of it, right? Is doing things that are crazy because you need to be crazy to make the world better. The task of making the world better is so big and so intimidating and so incredibly intractable that you gotta be crazy to do it. And I would like to live in a world where you don't have to be crazy to make the world better. And I think that we're getting close to that world every single day because we make we enable people to make smarter decisions and to affect wider ranges of things and to be more independently productive. But you still have to be crazy to change the world for the better. And I think that we would probably do well to build a world where you can be sane and also change the world for the better, or you can be experienced and also change the world for the better, where we have a set of like practices and things that we do regularly to encourage ourselves to not just assume the status quo is the way things are always going to be, and to remind ourselves that things can change on a regular basis, and the assumptions and social norms that we have are not in place permanently, and in fact they often change quite quickly. Like, a great example of this, public education, which seems like the most intractable thing in the world. Like, we've literally been trying to innovate in the space of education for over 100 years. Everyone knows that education is broken. Everyone wants to change it, and yet it is still almost exactly the same as when we set it up. So you'd think when we set it up, it took a long time, it was really hard. We established this social norm that is so immovable, but yet we did it really in the span of maybe a decade or two. And so it doesn't seem like we can dismantle it, like we can make it better or change it, just because we've tried a lot and it hasn't worked. But I think that's just because the things that we've been trying have been terrible ideas. Nobody has really tried something that works substantially better than public education right now. And kudos to public education, that's because it works really well. But the issue there is that it keeps people who have really good ideas that might work from even trying, because they're like, well, that's a thing that's never going to change. When in fact, it probably would be easy to change in a surprisingly short period of time, just like it was set up in a surprisingly short period of time. I know I'm conflating some things here, and there are some fallacies here. Like, education is not necessarily going to be easy to dismantle in the same period of time in which it was set up. But at least that could work as a like rough analog for what you might expect, right? Like, if we could go from 0 to full public education in this amount of time, could you expect to go from full public education to a new thing that's better than full public education in a similar period of time? Or faster? Probably. But yet people assume like, oh, this will take generations to fix. However, will we come up with a new system and pass legislation about it? We will. Like, it will happen out of necessity. I think the greatest encouragement for me in my young life was seeing the FAA, which is a government organization that has not changed its rules in literally 50 years, because no new aircraft has been invented in 50 years that work differently than current aircraft. People fly planes, the planes work differently, sometimes they're newer, but there's just people flying planes. And recently, in the last 2 years, people are also flying drones. And then out of nowhere, the FAA, which has not made new rules for 50 years, made a new rule in 6 months. That's unbelievably fast for a federal agency. And so if that can happen, I have no doubt that if something similarly awesome and really cool opportunity for both business and for students and for parents comes up as an effective alternative to education, the same pace will, the availability of our systems of governance to change on a dime when it's obviously advantageous and it's a bipartisan issue, like, it can happen. And I know that the systems of the FAA and regulatory approval there are very different from the Department of Education. But still, the point stands that when we find a solution that works well and that is undeniably a good idea, it stands to change. Like, we can do better, and we will. And I just need to drill that into my 24-year-old and getting older mind as much as humanly possible. The status quo, the way things are, the life you're used to living, the routine you have is not how it's always going to be. It can change day to day. You can always make it better. You can always change the world. You can always think outside of the box. Never, ever, ever, ever forget that. I don't care if you've been around for 5 years or 500 years, or maybe a realistic number like 20 years or 90 years. It's important to never forget that the world can always be new. There's always new stuff to learn. There's always places you're wrong. There's always things you misunderstand. There's always assumptions you're making that do not map to reality. And you should always question the things you think you know. Because being an expert is no way to innovate. It is only a way to stop yourself from doing the most important work you can be doing, which is Solving problems only you can solve. Okay, that was an idealistic rant. Glad we had that. Thanks for tuning in for this floor talk. It was great. Tune in for, another video, because I make 3 of these a day, and they're super cool. And sometimes I lay down on Godzilla. Leave a comment, subscribe, click like, do whatever you want. It's YouTube. It's your choice. Go for it. Have fun. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.